Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute. Well, I had an absolutely fantastic weekend. It wasn't what you would call exciting in that my wife and I didn't go to some exotic or even romantic location, but we just relaxed. And we did a whole lot of nothing. We did celebrate our 51st wedding anniversary. And by the way, thanks to all of you who expressed your, congratulations for our 51 years. Life is truly wonderful when you have your true soulmate. And 51 years of marriage have been truly wonderful, truly happy, truly blessed with my wonderful wife. So, anyway, let's get back to it, shall we? We're looking at Jesus' statement in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 36, where, remember, in response to the disciples' question, the questions that were asked in response to his comment. What was his comment? His comment was regarding the temple, regarding the city. Do you not see all of these things? The time is coming in which not one stone shall be left standing on top of another. The apostles immediately asked, "Tell us, when shall these things be? What shall be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" Now, let me remind you, I've just finished a brand new book entitled Watching for the Parousia. Were Jesus' apostles confused? Now, I wrote this book, and inventory has been ordered. They'll be on their way. They should be on their way shortly, and I don't mean in the futurist sense of shortly, of one of these years, gazillion years off. But I wrote this book because it is taken for granted by commentators that when Jesus made the prediction of the fall of Jerusalem and the temple, the apostles were so stunned. They had no idea that such a thing could ever happen, which means, of course, they were totally ignorant that the temple had been destroyed in 586 BC. Gee, they had no idea of that, right? And so the apostles were supposedly shocked. They had no idea the temple was supposed to be destroyed. And they were confused. They could only imagine that the temple would be destroyed if it was at the end of the material creation. That was John Calvin's view. And so, again, I wrote this book to demonstrate there is literally no evidence whatsoever to suggest, to hint, to be able to say that Jesus' apostles were confused. Now, what that means is, if they were not confused, and in their mind they linked the fall of Jerusalem with the coming of the Lord and the end of the age, and if they were not confused, and if they were not wrong, then guess what? That means that all futurist eschatologies are wrong, because all futurist eschatologies say the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple had nothing whatsoever to do with the coming of the Lord and the end of the age. But wait a minute. If the apostles connected those events, and if they were not wrong, and if they were not confused, then guess what? There was a connection, an inseparable connection between the destruction of the temple and the city and the coming of the Lord and the resurrection. And by the way, I document extensively that the Old Testament made that very connection. Okay, so it is generally conceded among the amillennialists and postmillennialists that in Matthew 24, 4 to 34 or 35, Jesus was discussing the fall of Jerusalem. It is conceded by men such as Kenneth Gentry. Certainly, my friend Gary DeMar takes the position, Matthew 24, 29 to 31, refers to and describes a historical day of the Lord, the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. Marcellus kick, on and on we could go. This is a common view. It's sometimes called the Reformed view. But then, of course, we're told that in verse 36, Jesus radically changed the subject. And his language, but of that day and hour, calls attention to the fact something like this. Okay, guys, look, I've told you when the fall of Jerusalem and the temple is going to be. But concerning the second part of your question, when am I going to come? When the end of the age is, of that day and hour knows no man. Now, once again, it is assumed without any proof whatsoever that the apostles were confused or wrong. And it is assumed without any proof whatsoever that Jesus is changing the subject. You see, before you can prove that Jesus was changing the subject, you have to be able to prove that the apostles were confused. And that can't be done. So be watching for this brand new book as soon as I get inventory in, or at least when I'm notified that shipment has been made. I'll be making a very special offer on this book as an introductory offer. So, one of the things that I've shared with you, and I've got to hurry here because I'm already at 7 minutes, is that the language that Jesus employs in Matthew 24:36 is taken directly from the Jewish feast days, and specifically the feast day of Rosh Hashanah. If you will remember, I shared with you 12 different names. Some of you have asked to receive a copy of those names. I've sent those out. But Rosh Hashanah was given 12 different names, descriptive of different elements, different tenets, different aspects of the feast days. Among them was resurrection. Among them was the last trumpet. Now, keep in mind, folks, that when Jesus used terminology, phraseology, verbiage that was a virtual quote from the vernacular of the day to speak of Rosh Hashanah, it really honestly behooves us to honor that connection. And what does that mean? It essentially means that Jesus was saying that the destruction of the temple, his coming, the end of the age, would come during Rosh Hashanah. Now, all of that's kind of reminder to bring us back to speed of where we are. Rosh Hashanah foreshadowed, typified the judgment, the resurrection, the last trumpet, etc. Because as the first of the last three feast days, it signified the impending end with the implication of a new beginning. Now, the reality is that the New Testament writers pick up on that language of the feast days. And they use it over and over and over again to speak of the impending, the imminent eschatological consummation. And I don't have time this morning. I have some really pressing business this morning. I don't have time this morning to go into 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and to develop there the tenets of Rosh Hashanah through Sukkot, and that means Rosh Hashanah, Atonement, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. Because found right here in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 are allusions echoes, almost citations to those final 3 feast days. Now listen, folks, here's the significance of this. If 1 Corinthians 15 is drawing directly from Israel's last 3 feast days, and it is, then that means without any shadow of a doubt that if the resurrection of 1 Corinthians 15 has not been fulfilled, then Israel's last 3 feast days have not been fulfilled. Put this simply, Paul was anticipating the harvest. Well, guess what? Sukkot foreshadowed the eschatological harvest. So if Paul is anticipating the harvest, and he was, then that means he was anticipating the fulfillment of Israel's last 3 feast days. But if those last 3 feast days were not yet fulfilled, then the law of Moses has not yet been fulfilled. And if the law of Moses has not been finally fulfilled in the resurrection of 1 Corinthians 15, then that means the law of Moses, God's covenant with Israel, remains valid and binding. So with that in mind, here's your homework, all right? I want you to read 1 Corinthians chapter 15, 20 through 52. 52. 20 through 52. And tomorrow, we're going to go through that and we're going to look at the allusions to, the references to the last 3 of Israel's feast days. So I'll see you on the flip side.